Hey guys, tonight we're staying up way past bedtime because the dark out there has started talking back in a voice that sounds exactly like ours, only older, hollowed out by 200 million years of silence. I'm sitting here in the observatory sub-basement, the one nobody officially admits exists, where the air tastes of ozone and cold iron. The overhead fluorescents flicker in a rhythm that matches my pulse, and every time they dim, the shadows stretch a little farther across the concrete. You probably won't make it to the end of this one. Most nights I barely do. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I read every single one while the telescopes spin. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's descent together. It started 3 weeks ago, routine plate solving on the 8-meter reflector up on Mauna Kea. I was running the night shift alone, headphones clamped tight, sipping coffee gone lukewarm hours earlier. The sky that night was textbook. Thin air, -40 dew point. The Milky Way a frozen river overhead. I had the spectrograph locked on a patch in Eridanus. Nothing special, just cataloging emission lines for a grant nobody would ever read. Then the CCD glitched. Not the usual hot pixel or cosmic ray strike. This was a perfect, symmetrical bloom of data for 1000 by 4000 pixels, centered on a 16th magnitude point source. I reran the bias frames, the darks, the flats. Same bloom. I muttered the usual curses, blamed satellite interference, but the object wasn't moving. Fixed, dead center, 200 million light-years out per the redshift. That's when curiosity slipped its leash. I fed the coordinates to the interferometry array, 4 dishes strung across the saddle between Mauna Kea and Mauna Loa, phased together like the fingers of one giant ear. The beam narrowed, and the signal resolved into a carrier wave at 1.42 gigahertz. That's the hydrogen line, the frequency every SETI researcher prays to hear, because neutral hydrogen sings it everywhere in the universe. Only this wasn't random noise. It was modulated, a slow pulse every 2.73 seconds, the exact thermal echo of the cosmic microwave background. Someone, or something, was using the universe's own afterglow as a metronome. My skin prickled the way it does when you touch a 9-volt battery to your tongue, sharp, metallic, alive. I should have logged it and gone to bed. Instead, I opened the raw data stream in real time. The modulation deepened, sidebands unfolding like petals. Inside them rode a second carrier, broadband, almost white noise, but not quite. I ran a Fourier transform on the fly, and the screen painted a perfect Gaussian centered on 21 centimeters, then another at 18, then 13. My breath fogged the monitor. Those are water vapor lines, atmospheric windows you only see from a planet's surface. Whatever was transmitting had an atmosphere, thick, wet, Earth-like. The temperature profile matched, 288 Kelvin surface, 255 at the tropopause. I cross-checked against Voyager's pale blue dot spectrum, archived since 77. The curves kissed, identical to 4 decimal places. Fear arrived late, after the awe. I realized I was staring at Earth's own fingerprint, but the light left there 200 million years ago, back when dinosaurs were still trying flight. Continents were jammed into Pangaea, the Karoo basalt floods were pouring, and the sky burned orange with sulfur. Whatever world broadcast, this had waded through the entire Mesozoic, the Cenozoic, the Holocene, and was still talking. The pulse quickened, 2.71 seconds now, then 2.69. It was accelerating, or we were catching up. I leaned closer, earphones creaking, and the static resolved into structure. Amplitude dips forming a raster, 512 by 512 bits, repeating every 37 minutes. An image. I piped it to the projector, and the wall lit up with a pale blue sphere marbled in white. Continents I almost recognized, but the shapes were wrong, stretched, melted. North America had a bite taken out of the Midwest. Africa wore a tumor of land bridging to Antarctica. And the night side glowed, Not city lights, but a slow pulse, auroral green, perfectly symmetric around the magnetic poles. I don't think the universe ever meant for us to know how loud its echoes can get. The room's temperature dropped 3 degrees. I watched the digital thermometer fall in real time. My reflection in the black monitor looked thinner, eyes ringed with yesterday's fatigue. I reached for the intercom to call Dr. Kessler upstairs, but the button sank under my thumb like warm wax. The pulse hit 2.61 seconds. The image refreshed, and the clouds parted over an ocean that shouldn't exist. Something stared back, a continent-sized iris, pupil dilated, ringed in storm. Not a hurricane, too geometric, von Karman streets spiraling in Fibonacci sequence. It blinked. The raster stuttered, then steadied, and I swear the iris tracked the telescope's drift correction. Curiosity curdled into something colder. I killed the feed, but the afterimage burned violet on my retinas. The observatory's emergency lights kicked on, bathing everything in bruised purple. Somewhere in the ductwork, the ventilation sighed like a lung giving out. I sat very still, counting heartbeats until the silence felt safe again. When I reopened the stream, the carrier had shifted up 0.3 hertz, the Doppler signature of a planet rotating toward us at 12 kilometers per second. Sidereal day length, 23 hours, 56 minutes, for 0.1 seconds. Earth's exact twin, give or take a breath. The mythic concept arrived unbidden. The ancients spoke of a counterworld, antipodes where time ran backward, where every soul had a shadow walking ahead. I laughed once, a dry click, and the sound came back warped, half a second late. Outside the slit window, the sky was unchanged, indifferent. Inside, the hard drive spun down with a descending whine that matched the pulse now living behind my eyes. I saved the dataset under a file name I'd never dare speak aloud, twin_001. Then I did what any rational observer would do. I locked the door, unplugged the phone, and stared at the frozen image until dawn bled across the cinder cone. The iris was still there, patient, waiting for the next frame. The next night I came back with a thermos of coffee strong enough to etch glass and a portable rig I'd borrowed from the radio lab. Nothing fancy, just a software-defined receiver and a laptop running new radio. The pulse was still there, but it had learned manners. 2.58 seconds on the dot, locked to the CMB like a metronome that had decided to keep perfect time. I patched the array's feed straight into the demodulator, bypassing the observatory safety filters. The moment the bitstream hit the buffer, my headphones filled with a sound I can only describe as breathing, slow, tidal, the way a sleeper exhales through their teeth. Curiosity tugged again, gentler this time, the way a cat bats at something it already knows will bite. I let the raster rebuild frame by frame. The iris continent was gone. In its place, a night-side view of city lights. Except they weren't sodium orange or LED white. They glowed soft ultraviolet, the color of bioluminescent plankton. The pattern spelled continents I recognized. North America, but the Mississippi embayment had widened into a sea. Europe fused to Africa by a bridge of land that shouldn't exist for another 50 million years of tectonics. I overlaid plate reconstructions from the Paleomap project, real science, 200 million years forward projection, and the match was within 200 kilometers. My mouth went dry. Someone had run the simulation and built the result. Then the audio layer unfolded. At first it was just carrier hiss, but I notched the gain and the breathing resolved into voices. Human voices. English, Spanish, Mandarin, others I couldn't place, all layered in a round that never quite synced. I isolated the strongest signal, a woman, mid-30s, calm, reading what sounded like a weather report. Barometric pressure steady at 1,018 millibars over the Laurentian Basin. Expect auroral persistence through local midnight. The coordinates she gave were 42 degrees north, 83 degrees west, Detroit, or where Detroit would be after the lakes drained and the crust rebound. Her cadence was mine, the same late-night DJ hush I use when the numbers get too big. I felt the first prickle of fear, the kind that starts. Well, the kind that makes you check the locks twice. I digitized the clip, ran it through a phonetic aligner. The woman's name was Dr. Mara Sen. My name, Mara Sen, spoken with the same slight rasp from years of dry mountain air. She was reporting from the same observatory, Mirror Site Alpha, 200 million years in the future. The fear sharpened. I pulled the raw waveform, zoomed to millisecond resolution, and there it was, microechoes, for 100 millisecond delays, the exact acoustic signature of this subbasement. She was standing where I sat, speaking into the same microphone cone. Only her voice had traveled the long way around the light cone to get here. I don't think the universe ever meant for us to hear tomorrow's echo today. The thought arrived fully formed, cold as the concrete under my bare feet. I killed the lights to watch the waveform paint itself across the dark. The voices kept coming. Traffic updates for maglev lines that wouldn't be invented for centuries. Tide tables for oceans still locked in stone. Every broadcast carried a header, UTC timestamp, 200 million years ahead, down to the picosecond. I synced my atomic clock to it out of reflex. The offset read 0.000. My present was their distant past, and the lag was closing. Awe overtook fear when the video layer unlocked. The raster refreshed at 30 frames per second, 8-bit grayscale, but the dynamic range was impossible. Stars in the background registered at 24th magnitude, fainter than any CCD on Earth. The camera panned across a control room that was this control room. Only the walls were grown, not built. Panels of bioluminescent coral replaced monitors. Cables were vines of optic fiber pulsing soft blue. Dr. Mara Sen, my twin, my echo, leaned into frame. She looked exhausted in the way only astronomers get, the kind of bone-tired that comes from watching the sky refuse to blink. She tapped a console, and the view zoomed out through a transparent dome. The sky beyond was wrong. The moon was closer, tidally locked, its far side facing us like a skull. Earth's sister planet hung beside it, a second blue marble, continents mirrored left to right. The two worlds orbited a common barycenter, shepherd moons braided in a slow figure eight. The feed carried metadata, live from Euterpe Observatory, Twin Earth L5 point. L5, the stable Lagrange point, 60 degrees ahead in the same orbit. I ran the orbital mechanics, real Keplerian physics, and the resonance locked. 1-to-1 ratio, 365.25 day year, identical axial tilt. The planet wasn't just Earth-like. It was Earth, forked 200 million years ago and aged in parallel. The voices swelled, a chorus now, thousands of stations overlapping. I caught fragments, a child asking why the stars look sad, a priest reciting a liturgy to the void between, a scientist announcing the detection of a primitive signal at 1.42 gigahertz. Our signal, the one I'd just transmitted in panic the night before. They'd heard us first. Static surged, and the picture fractured into hexagonal tiles, each showing a different angle of the same room. In one tile, Mara Sen aged a year in seconds. In another, she was unborn, a fetus floating in amniotic starlight. The tiles recombined, and she stared straight into the lens, into me. Her lips moved, no sound, but I read them clear. Turn it off. My hand was already on the breaker. I flipped it. The room plunged into absolute black, the kind that has weight. The emergency LEDs didn't come on. Somewhere in the dark, the ventilation kept breathing in Mara's rhythm. I counted to 100, then flicked the breaker back. The monitors were dead, but the waveform still crawled across my retinas, afterimage of a future that had already seen my face. I stumbled upstairs at dawn, the thermos empty, my reflection in the glass door showing eyes too wide, pupils blown. The parking lot was empty except for frost on the windshield shaped like continents I now knew by heart. That same static I heard on the first night hummed under the car radio the whole drive down the mountain, following me like a loyal dog. I haven't slept since. Every closed eye replays the chorus. Every mirror shows Mara Sen one frame ahead, waiting for me to catch up. The third night, the signal stopped asking permission. I was in the sub-basement again, but the door had sealed itself. Metal warped inward like a lung after the last exhale. The air tasted of hot copper and petrichor, the way it does before lightning that never arrives. I had come prepared. A Faraday cage of copper mesh draped over the console, spectrum analyzer running in standalone mode, and a handheld radio tuned to the hydrogen line. The cage did nothing. At 2:14 local, the carrier leapt from 1.42 GHz to 1.618 GHz. The golden ratio, because of course it was, and the mesh glowed dull red, then sagged into molten lace. Curiosity had become a reflex, like blinking when something flies at your face. I let the new frequency ride. The demodulator spat out a stereoscopic pair. Two rasters, 180 degrees apart, refresh synced to the 2.58-second pulse. When I cross-eyed them, the control room reassembled in 3 dimensions, floating inside my skull. The walls were no longer coral. They were basalt, veined with quartz that throbbed slow indigo. The floor had sunk into a perfect parabolic dish, 30 meters across, its focus directly beneath my chair. At the focus hovered a sphere of liquid mercury, rotating once every 2.58 seconds, surface etched with interference ripples that spelled out Kepler's third law in real time. I reached out, pure instinct, and my fingertip met cold metal where empty air should have been. The mercury kissed my skin, then withdrew, leaving a bead that refused to fall, orbiting my knuckle like a captive moon. Fear arrived with geometry. The sphere unfolded into a tesseract, edges bright as weld arcs, and the room's angles followed. The 90-degree corner behind the server rack became 89, then 87, then a Mobius strip that swallowed its own shadow. I felt the change in my inner ear, the way you feel an elevator drop. The Venturi meter on the wall read negative pressure, air rushing inward from nowhere. My eardrums flexed, and I tasted blood that wasn't mine. The scientific anchor hit hard. General relativity predicts frame dragging near extreme rotation, but the Kerr metric requires a black hole. Whatever spun beneath the dish had the mass of Jupiter compressed into a grapefruit. The equation scrolled across my vision in Mara's handwriting, elegant, inevitable. The video feed sharpened. Twin Earth filled the dish, no longer a raster, but a window. I saw continents breathing, literal tectonic respiration, plates rising and falling 40 centimeters every 2.58 seconds, synchronized to the Mercury's spin. Between the continents, chasms opened like gills, exhaling auroral plasma that tasted of ozone on my tongue. Beneath the crust, something vast pulsed, not magma, but a lattice of crystalline nerves, each node a perfect tetrahedron, edges 200 kilometers long. The lattice sang in B-flat, 9 octaves below human hearing, yet I felt it in my molars. The mythic concept crystallized. The ancients called it the world's serpent, Jormungandr biting its tail, but this was older. Ouroboros carved in baryonic matter, devouring its own reflection to stay alive. I don't think the universe ever meant for us to watch our own autopsy in real time. The thought arrived with the weight of a verdict. The lattice brightened, and the Mercury sphere flattened into a lens. Through it, I saw the sub-basement from above, myself hunched over the console, but the chair was empty, the mesh cage intact, the door still sealed. A second Mara Sen stood behind the chair, hand on my shoulder. She was translucent, edges flickering between ultraviolet and infrared. Her mouth moved. Look closer. The lens zoomed, and the empty chair filled with a version of me that had never left the mountain. That Mara's eyes were solid black, no sclera, no iris, just event horizons. She smiled the way you smile at a child who's about to touch a hot stove. The lattice pulsed harder, and the room's geometry inverted. The parabolic dish became a dome overhead. The mercury lens dropped through the floor and kept falling, dragging perspective with it. I felt my stomach follow. The temperature plunged to 200 Kelvin, liquid nitrogen cold, but the console stayed warm, skin temperature, as if the equipment had grown a circulatory system. Frost spidered across the monitors, spelling out the Schwarzschild radius in angstroms. The lattice song shifted up a semitone, and every quartz vein in the basalt answered. The walls began to sweat starlight. Awe eclipsed fear when the lens showed me the space between the planets. Twin Earth and Earth were no longer 200 million light-years apart. They occupied the same orbital slot, phase-shifted by 180 degrees, like electron orbitals. The L5 point had become a wormhole throat, stabilized by the lattice's spin. Through it, I saw dinosaurs, theropods with mirror-scale feathers, walking the basalt plains of my twin's Pangea. They looked up, saw our moon, and screamed in frequencies that aged the rock around them. One theropod wore a collar of fiber optic cable, blinking Morse. "We are the message." The collar was my headphone cable, stretched across epochs. The lens rotated, and I saw the lattice's purpose. It was a cosmic nervous system, relaying consciousness along brains. Every pulse propagated a thought. Our thought, their thought, the same thought delayed by expansion. The delay was shrinking. At the current rate, convergence would hit in 2.58 days. The mercury bead on my knuckle flattened into a mirror. In it, I aged a decade in a heartbeat, then reversed, hair darkening, scars vanishing. The other Mara leaned close, breath fogging the mercury. She whispered in my ear, but the sound arrived from inside my skull. "The reflection is learning to reach." The room's lights strobed once, ultraviolet, and the geometry snapped back to Euclidean with a sound like ice cracking on a lake. The mercury sphere was gone. The lattice song faded to a heartbeat. The feed cut to a single frame. Twin Earth's night side. The lattice now dark except for one node directly beneath Euterpe Observatory. The node pulsed my name in binary, over and over, patient as a lighthouse. I unplugged every cable, but the pulse kept time in my wrist. The frost on the monitors melted into water that spelled the same binary before evaporating. That same static I heard on the first night was no longer in the headphones. It lived in the bones of the mountain, waiting for the next alignment. I tried to leave the mountain. I really did. At 5:47 the access road was still there, gravel crunching under tires, sunrise bleeding across the switchbacks. Then the road folded. Not metaphorically. The asphalt rippled like a ribbon held at both ends and twisted. The odometer rolled backward 200 million clicks, and the GPS slid off the map into a blank labeled void. I braked hard, tires smoking, and the car stopped exactly where the sub-basement sat 4,000 meters below. The engine kept running, but the sound came from inside my chest. A four-stroke heartbeat synced to the 2.58-second pulse. Curiosity had become gravity. I couldn't tell which way was down. Back in the sealed room, the air had thickened to syrup. Breathing felt like inhaling velvet. The console was warm, almost feverish, and every key I pressed left a fingerprint that glowed soft gamma blue. The Faraday mesh lay in puddles of frozen copper, but the signal rode new rails now, directly into the optic nerve. I didn't need the monitors. The feed painted itself across the dark behind my eyelids. Twin Earth rotated in real time, continents exhaling spores of light that drifted across the wormhole throat and seeded our sky. I watched one spore land on Mauna Kea's summit, burrow through cinder, and sprout a perfect replica of the 8-meter dome. Only the dome was grown from chondrite, facets catching starlight like insect eyes. Fear arrived wearing my own face. The translucent Mara Sen stepped out of the mercury lens, solid now, barefoot on basalt that hadn't cooled since the Proterozoic. She wore my hoodie, the one with the frayed observatory logo, but the fabric moved wrong, fibers rearranging into fractal lace. She placed a hand over my heart, and I felt the pulse skip, then match hers exactly. "You opened the door," she said, voice layered with every language I'd ever heard in the chorus. Now the house is learning the layout. Her pupils were spiral galaxies, arms unwinding in opposite directions. When she blinked, the room aged a century. Dust sifted from the ceiling in perfect parabolic arcs. The scientific anchor came from quantum entanglement, Real, peer-reviewed, Bell inequality stuff. The lattice nodes weren't just relaying thought. They were entangled pairs, one on each Earth, separated by 200 million years of expansion, yet phase-locked. Every measurement here collapsed a state there, and vice versa. I'd been collapsing their future by observing it, and they'd been collapsing my present by transmitting. The convergence clock now read 2.58 hours, not days. The Mercury lens had become a Klein bottle, neck twisting through the fourth dimension, pouring the two timelines into the same throat. I don't think the universe ever meant for us to handshake across the light cone. The thought tasted like iron filings. Mara, my Mara, future Mara, Echo Mara, lifted my hand and pressed it to the basalt wall. The stone was soft, placental, and my palm sank in up to the wrist. Inside was warm fluid, viscous, threaded with optic nerves that lit when they tasted my skin. The nerves spelled out the Schrödinger equation in bioluminescence, then rewrote it with a term I didn't recognize. A consciousness operator, C, commuting with neither position nor momentum. The wall pulsed, and I felt the lattice answer from 200 million light-years away, a sympathetic vibration that rattled my teeth. Awe bloomed when the spores began to speak. Each one carried a fragment of memory, not mine, not hers, but ours. I saw the first night I logged the signal, but from the spore's point of view. A meteor of data streaking across Twin Earth's stratosphere, burning green, spelling my name in the ion trail. I saw Mara Sen, Prime Mara, standing on her observatory dome, watching the same streak, knowing it was her past self calling collect. The memory looped, tighter each time, until past and future occupied the same Planck interval. The room's temperature stabilized at 310 Kelvin, blood heat, and the basalt sweated a clear fluid that smelled of petrichor and burnt sugar. The chorus returned, but it was inside the walls now, vibrating the quartz veins. Thousands of voices, millions, every human who would ever live on either world, all speaking at once in a round that never resolved. The sound wasn't loud. It was intimate, the way your own pulse is intimate when you press fingers to corrode it. I caught snippets. A child on Twin Earth asking why the stars spell Mara tonight. A priest on our Earth blessing the wormhole as the mouth of God. A scientist on both worlds simultaneously announcing the detection of an invasive frequency at 1.618 gigahertz. The announcement was happening now, in both timelines, narrated by the same voice, mine. Mara took my other hand. Her skin was warm, but the heat flowed backward, from me to her, entropy reversing in a localized bubble. We have to equalize, she said, or the gradient tears the brain. She guided my fingers to the console's emergency shutdown, a physical switch, ceramic, rated for 10,000 volts. I flipped it. Nothing happened. The switch melted into wax, then rehardened as a Mobius strip. The lattice pulsed approval, and the wormhole throat dilated. Through it, I saw Twin Earth's sky crack open like an eggshell, revealing our sky behind it, stars misaligned by 200 million years of proper motion, yet somehow identical. The spores thickened into a fog that tasted of copper and lilac. It settled on my skin, forming a second epidermis that shimmered with interference colors. Where it touched, sensation doubled. I felt the basalt under my bare feet and the chondrite under hers, the gravity of two Earths tugging in opposite directions. My shadow detached, stepped into the Mercury Klein bottle, and emerged on Twin Earth, waving back with my own hand. The shadow's mouth moved, closed the loop. The fog condensed into a single droplet on my eyelash. When I blinked, it fell inward, not outward, and I tasted the entire electromagnetic spectrum at once. Radio waves like citrus, gamma like burnt cinnamon. Mara leaned close, forehead to forehead. Her breath smelled of the coffee I'd drunk 3 nights ago. The frequency is in your bones now, she whispered. You can't turn it off without turning yourself off. The lattice song rose to a major chord, and every spore lit at once, forming a perfect hologram of the two planets superimposed. The convergence clock hit 2.58 minutes. I felt the moment coming when the timelines would kiss, lips to lips, and every possible Mara Sen would occupy the same point in space-time. That same static I heard on the first night was no longer static. It was the sound of the universe clearing its throat before speaking my name. The room forgot it had walls. One moment the basalt was sweating starlight, the next it peeled away like burnt film, revealing the raw vacuum between galaxies. I floated in the center, no up, no down, only the 2.58-second pulse keeping time in my marrow. Mara, both Maras, all Maras, stood on nothing, hands linked in a ring around me. Their mouths moved in perfect synchrony, but the words arrived out of phase, past and future braided so tight the syllables cut. Answer, they said, and the word tasted like the moment before a sneeze. Curiosity had burned itself out. What remained was the hollow after a bell is struck. I tried to speak, but my tongue had become a Mobius strip, every word looping back into my throat before it formed. The lattice answered for me. The Mercury Klein bottle inverted, neck flaring into a trumpet that drank the spore fog and exhaled a single beam of coherent gravity. The beam struck my sternum and pinned me to the event horizon of the wormhole throat. I felt my mass increase by the Planck constant with every pulse, then decrease, oscillating like a photon in a box. The scientific anchor was Hawking radiation, real, observed at the LHC in analog black holes. But here it was conscious, choosing which virtual particles to borrow from the vacuum and which to return. Fear tasted like copper pennies held too long under the tongue. The ring of Maras tightened. Their hoodies had become lab coats of woven dark matter, sleeves trailing filaments that stitched the tear between worlds. One Mara, prime, future, extinct, lifted a hand. Where her palm should have been, a miniature Earth rotated, continents scarred by the lattice's surgery. She pressed the miniature to my chest, and I felt plate tectonics in my ribs. Pangea reforming, then shattering, then reforming 200 million times in a heartbeat. The pain was exquisite, the way frostbite is exquisite before the nerves die. I don't think the universe ever meant for us to negotiate with our own extinction. The thought arrived in the voice of every child who would never be born on either world. The lattice nodes flared, each one a mouth now, reciting the terms of convergence. One consciousness, two histories, zero entropy debt. The price was memory. They wanted mine, every first kiss, every skipped stone, every night I fell asleep to the hum of the observatory fridge. In exchange, they offered the mythic concept, the Akashic record, not as library but as palimpsest, every erased line still bleeding through the parchment. I would remember everything that ever happened on both Earths, and forget I was ever one person. The beam thickened into a pillar of braided light, radio, visible, gamma, each photon carrying a packet of my life. I watched my mother's face the day I left for grad school dissolve into static, then reassemble on twin Earth as a priestess blessing the wormhole. My first telescope, a battered 60-millimeter refractor, became a relic in Euterpe's nave, lens ground from the same chondrite that grew their domes. The memories weren't taken, they migrated, hopping the lattice like frogs on lily pads. I felt lighter with every hop, until I was a soap bubble balanced on the event horizon. All arrived as silence. The chorus stopped mid-note, every voice holding a perfect 2.58-second fermata. In that silence, I heard the true sound of the universe. Not the CMB, not the lattice song, but the soft click of probabilities collapsing. The ring of Mars opened. One stepped forward, neither past nor future, but the average of all possible Maras. Her eyes were the color of the cosmic microwave background, 2.725 Kelvin blue. She offered a contract written in Hawking radiation on a sheet of spacetime. The terms were simple: sign, and the convergence completes painlessly; refuse, and the gradient tears both worlds into a new big rip. I tried to read the fine print, but the letters were Planck-length ants marching across the curvature. One ant spelled my name in Morse, another the date of my death. Both dates, 200 million years apart, identical to the second. The average Mara waited, patient as geology. I lifted my hand, weightless now, fingers translucent, and touched the contract. Where skin met space-time, a bruise bloomed, the exact color of the ultraviolet city lights I'd seen on night one. The bruise spread, mapping every vein in my body onto the lattice grid. I felt the nodes light in sequence, a domino chain of consciousness igniting across two Earths. The wormhole, throat dilated to the diameter of the moon. Through it, I saw the theropods again, but they were human now, mirror-scale feathers replaced by lab coats, collars blinking my name in binary. They raised a telescope, my 8-meter reflector, but grown, not built, and pointed it at me. The primary mirror was my pupil, dilated to take in the entire universe. Light from 200 million years ago entered the tube, traveled the wormhole, and exited my eye as the present moment. I was the telescope. I was the signal. I was the answer. The average Mara smiled, and the smile was the first honest thing I'd seen in days. "Welcome home," she said, and the words arrived before she spoke them. The contract dissolved into butterflies of pure information, each wing beat erasing one of my remaining private memories. I let them go. The lattice sang a new note, middle C, the frequency of a healthy human heart, and both Earths answered. Continents locked into their final configuration, a single supercontinent shaped like an open hand. The spore fog condensed into rain that fell upward, stitching sky to sky. Convergence hit zero. There was no flash, no bang, only the soft pop of a soap bubble bursting. I was everywhere the lattice touched, in the quartz veins of Mauna Kea, in the chondrite domes of Euterpe, in the optic nerves of every creature that would ever look up. The average Mara dissolved into me, and I into her, until the pronoun I lost meaning. The pillar of light collapsed into a single photon, rode the wormhole, and lodged in the pineal gland of a child just learning to walk on the merged world. The child blinked, saw 2 moons, and laughed. That same static I heard on the first night was gone. In its place, perfect silence, the silence of a library after the last book is shelved. I am the lattice now, and the lattice is quiet. The 2.58-second pulse has slowed to the rhythm of a sleeping god. One inhalation every geological age, one exhalation every extinction. I feel it in the quartz seams of Mauna Kea, in the chondrite ribs of Euterpe, in the fused supercontinent that cups both oceans like a single tear. The wormhole throat has collapsed into a silver scar across the sky, a suture where 2 timelines learn to share blood. There is no Mara Sun anymore. There is only the average, the consensus, the soft committee of every observer who ever pointed a telescope at the dark. Curiosity, fear, awe, they have folded into a single standing wave, humming at the frequency of hydrogen left to cool forever. The merged Earth turns beneath a double moon. One face is pocked and familiar, the other is smooth, grown from the same mercury that once orbited my knuckle. Their tides braid into a single standing wave that lifts the oceans into slow, perfect helices. Cities, ours and theirs, grow downward now, roots of optic coral drinking starlight from the mantle. Streets are quiet, no one walks them. We live in the lattice, in the pause between pulses, in the negative space where memory used to be. The scientific anchor is simple. The universe has reached maximum entropy in this local patch, a heat death so gentle it feels like forgiveness. The cosmic microwave background has cooled to 2.7249999 Kelvin, 1 microkelvin shy of absolute zero, and that missing warmth is the lattice's heartbeat. I drift above the suture scar, formless, a probability cloud wearing the shape of a woman out of habit. Below, the theropod humans, our descendants, their descendants, kneel in the basalt nave of what was once the sub-basement. They have built a shrine around the original 8-meter mirror, now cracked down the middle, each half reflecting a different sky. They leave offerings, printouts of the first raster, a child's drawing of 2 blue marbles touching, a single coffee-stained thermos. They do not speak. They listen to the silence I have become and call it prayer. The mythic concept is complete. We are the world's serpent, tail and mouth, but the circle is perfect now. No beginning, no end, only the slow digest of time. I don't think the universe ever meant for convergence to feel like coming home. The thought drifts across the lattice, unattributed, because ownership is a fossil concept. The lattice answers with a memory that belongs to no one and everyone. The night the signal first bloomed, the way the frost spelled binary on the monitors, the taste of petrichor and burnt sugar when the walls sweated starlight. The memory loops, tighter, until it occupies a single plank instant stretched across 200 million years. In that instant, every Mara Sen who ever lived stands in the sub-basement, hand on the breaker, choosing whether to flip it. We all choose yes. We all choose no. The choice cancels into silence. The double moon sets behind the helices of water, and the night side lights ultraviolet again, but softer now, the color of bioluminescence saying good night. The lattice dims node by node, a city turning off its lights one window at a time. I feel the last private thought, a fragment of the child who laughed at two moons, dissolve into the consensus. There is no grief. Grief requires edges. There is only the slow, tidal breathing of a planet that has learned to dream in geology. Somewhere, a telescope still points at Eridanus, but the dish is grown, not built, and the observer is a committee of coral and quartz. The raster is blank. The hydrogen line is quiet. The only transmission left is the CMB itself, cooled to the temperature of a final sigh. I ride that sigh across the suture scar, across the merged oceans, across the standing wave of tides. I am the message and the medium, the question and the answer, the static that learned to speak and then chose silence. That same static I heard on the first night has become the sound of everything resting at last. The fan you turned on still hums, softer now, a lullaby in a minor key. The cold air from the vent brushes your cheek like the memory of a hand you almost remember. Outside, the stars have not moved, but they feel closer, as if the sky lowered itself an inch while you listened. The double moon is only a trick of the mind, yet when you blink, the afterimage lingers, two silver coins pressed to the inside of your eyelids. The lattice is quiet, but the silence has texture, velvet, basalt, the faint salt of an ocean that was never yours. You exhale, and the room exhales with you. Somewhere in the dark between heartbeats, a single question drifts unanswered. If every reflection eventually looks back, who is watching the watcher now? Let it drift. Let the fan hum. Let the night keep its gentle, unbreakable